Wonderful session at our Expo. You get to listen to Dr. Parsons from UNL. He's an agricultural economist. Once again, quality information for our special community with the wonderful Dexter cattle. I just want to let you know, the UNL has cooperated with us in just an astounding way. These people are coming out of the goodness of their heart to come and share all this information, and these people know what they're talking about. We appreciate it. We really do. And we look forward to partnering with UNL further because we need the information they have, and we've learned a whole lot so far. So thank you, Dr. Parsons. We're glad you're here. Yeah.
Well, thank you all. It's good to be here and share with you some of this information on developing the marketing plan. I'm used to being out with producers or being with students, either one, and interrupting me is not a problem. So if you have a question and want to interrupt and ask it, please raise your hand and let me know, okay? So I'm going to approach this really kind of from a holistic sense of a marketing plan, not necessarily whether you're marketing meat product or live animals or commodities or actual products or services. I'm going to talk about what it takes to put together a marketing plan and what all goes into there and things you should be thinking about, okay? So hopefully, with that kind of broad stroke, you walk away with some information you can use. But feel free, again, to ask questions where I'm maybe not hitting the target exactly in terms of answering what you would like to know, okay? So I'm going to start with this, which is our traditional marketing channel that we've seen in agriculture for years, and we're used to seeing things down here on the producer level where you're buying inputs and then essentially selling a live product in the livestock side or a grain product to somebody on the first handling. And then they take it from there, right? And they get it to the actual consumer through a number of different ways, processing, wholesaling, getting out to the retail side, and so on and so forth, okay? Now, over the last several years, these lines have become a little more blurred, okay? And there's people capturing different segments of that market, largely after it leaves the farm gate. Largely in this sector right here, we see a lot of vertical integration and so on and so forth. But we're also seeing a lot from the producer side in terms of trying to capture part of that market with different approaches, whether it be direct marketing, whether it be farmers markets, whether it be cooperatives, different things like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as a motivation then as we go into developing what we would call a marketing strategy or marketing plan. Okay? All right, so when it comes to a marketing strategy, it's very important to realize that most successful businesses are customer-oriented, okay? And that's hard in agriculture because we're really proud of what we produce. And we like to focus on what we produce and say it's really great. But in order to market it successfully, you've got to look at what it does for your customer, okay? A great example of this that's pointed out a lot is Apple. Okay? Apple has a fantastic product with the iPhone that we know of today, right? I happen to have one, not because I'm an Apple loyalist, but because I just enjoy using it, okay? But Apple, from the get-go, had a great product, but that product was focused on what it did for consumers, right? So when they developed the first Apple IIe, okay, and then eventually the Macintosh and the iOS operating system, which got copied by Windows, it was all about making it a good customer experience, okay? So that's a great example of somebody that was successful with a customer-oriented business plan in terms of marketing, right? When you see Apple commercials, what do you see? You don't see some tech guy in a back room developing a great interface. What you see is a customer using it and enjoying the product, okay? So that's point number one. The other thing, as I mentioned in ag, we're very proud of what we do, and a lot of times we get more product-oriented and lose sight of the customer. An example, I would give you that, there's a company called Optobrand. How many of you have heard of Optobrand? Okay? None of you have, right? Well, Optobrand developed the retinal scan for animal ID in particular. When I was involved with the animal ID project pretty heavily in the first decade of this century, back when we had the mad cow thing in 2003 and there's really all this animal ID tracing thing, Optobrand was a big player in that conversation because it was viewed as the gold standard animal ID because you had this unique retinal scan that told you exactly the animal you're looking at, people couldn't mess with it, all of these things. Okay? They were in love with their product. High technology and so on and so forth. They were in a lot of meetings, right? They never did get past the point of actually focusing on the customer and how it would work for the customer. Okay? I told them at that time that they really needed to focus on the club market where the animals were alive and wanted to be tracked and all that kind of stuff. They did do some of that, but they tried to focus more on the commercial industry, and in particular on livestock disease tracing, right? One of the problems with livestock with disease is they die, and once they die, the retinal scan is useless as a tool to identify them. They never did quite come to grips with that, okay? But they loved their product, but they didn't ever find that niche for it, I guess, in terms of what it did for the customer, okay? So even though you love your product, when it comes to developing a marketing plan, make sure you focus on the customer. It's the bottom line. Okay? So step one, I'm going to go through several steps here. Yes, sir? Does anybody know how to adjust that? Yeah. Actually. Testing, is that better? All right. Thank you. Yeah. I think everybody can hear me. You guys hear me back? All right, we're better. I just said some really brilliant things, so all those things you couldn't hear, yeah, they're the most important things of the talk. Now I'll reiterate all of them as we go through. Okay, so I'm going to go through several steps here, and some of them are going to take a little longer than others, okay? But the number one and the most important thing is to define your target market, okay? Who is it that you're going to serve? And as a part of that, you've got to define what you're actually selling them. Let's go hand in hand, so I put that in smaller print, because again, we're focusing on the customer. But we need to be realistic and realize what it is we're actually selling them. Okay? Are we selling them a product? Are we selling them a service? Or are we selling them both? Okay? And a lot of time in niche marketing, you're actually selling them both. Especially if you're delivering your product. The delivery part of it is a service. Okay? How you deliver it and so on and so forth could be very much just as important to them as the product itself. Okay? Also, I would argue the way you produce it can be viewed as a service to them, because you're producing it in a certain way that they would like to see their food produced. Okay? Yes, they're buying a product, they might be buying meat from you or whatever the case may be, but they're also buying the service from you in the way that you produce it. Okay? So just recognizing what it is that you're actually delivering to the consumer is important. Okay? And then, of course, commodity versus differentiated product. Okay? You guys probably don't view your product as a commodity, right? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Certainly as a meat, it might be on a meat shelf, just a commodity, okay? But that's quite a bit different marketing plan than if you're actually doing a differentiated product, okay? And I work with a lot of commercial ag producers who don't recognize they're just marketing a commodity, okay? In the livestock industry, I'll have producers come up to me and tell me, although they're fantastic genetics, great meat it produces, and so on and so forth. And then when we talk about how they're actually marketing it, they're just running it through the sale barn with everybody else, or they're just delivering it to the packer with everybody else. They swear they're getting a higher price because it's such high quality, but they can't really prove it. Okay? They're really marketing a commodity. Nothing wrong with that. You need to recognize that in terms of where you put your resources, right? Because there's commodity marketing tools available for your marketing plan on that side, and you're probably better putting a lot of your time and energy into making sure that you can produce it at a competitive cost of production, okay? So it's just a matter of recognizing where you're at in that marketplace. Okay, also recognize whether this is a business-to-business sale or whether you're going straight to the consumer, okay? Because that'll make a difference too in terms of how you handle that and basically your communication channels, okay? Right? Most commodities, of course, are marketed business to business as far as the farmer goes, right? Farmer or rancher's marketing to somebody that's handling it and getting it to the consumer. What's that?
Dexter's are consumer-oriented.
Yeah. Right. Okay, and I'm going to focus most of this talk actually on, oops, I hit the wrong button. Thought I was advancing it. I'm going to focus most of this talk actually on the differentiated side, so we'll be there. I just got a couple of things to say about commodities and recognizing it, and then we'll move on from that. Okay, commodities, of course, there's little differentiation to it, right? So if your meat ends up in the meat case looking like this, it's viewed by the consumer as just another piece of meat, right? It's a commodity to them. You're not going to be able to get a lot of price differentiation there compared to anybody else, right? There's a lot of competitors in that. Price itself is very much supply driven. Where there's not a lot of supply of that, prices go up, that kind of stuff. And so your marketing decisions in this world here is largely related to the timing and the location, how you get that product to them and what time of year you're delivering it, okay? In a differentiated setting, right, you're adding value in some capacity, right? You're providing something that you think makes it a more unique product or more valuable than the generic commodities that are out there, okay? So I just plucked a couple of more common branded beef things off the internet, okay? And there's several of them here in Nebraska. I think I counted 13 to 15 of them up on the website that I just grabbed these from, okay? But they're differentiating it, right? Maybe it's something in the process, maybe there's a quality characteristic there, but ultimately they're slapping a brand on it of some sort that they think makes it recognized as a superior product, okay? In this world, there's generally less competitors, although I just mentioned there's actually a lot of competitors in the branded beef world, right? Okay, to work with, but it's largely demand-driven. Can you create the demand for your brand? Okay, all right. So a little bit different approach to it, right? So as you look at this, and you say, I'm going to develop a product here that I'm going to differentiate in the marketplace and I'm going to sell and make good money from. What is it important that you do there as you define your target market, okay? Well, you need to look at it from a market segmentation standpoint, right? What is it that that customer looks like that you're going to sell to, okay? And you got to be realistic on it. Is there a, a lot of people just say, well, I'm going to market far and wide and a bunch of people are going to buy it. Okay, well, that usually ends up just spreading things out and you actually miss a lot of the people that would really buy it if they knew about it. Okay? All right? So be realistic on where this fits. Geographically, how wide and how big a scope are you looking at there? Okay? Where do they live? Okay? What do they look like? Okay? Demographically, what kind of age bracket are you looking for? Is there a difference between male, female perspectives? Okay, on it? Are there racial differences, right? We got a lot of different ethnic groups in the country that buy certain meats. I work a lot with the sheep industry. They sell a whole bunch of theirs to the ethnic groups in New York in particular, New York, D.C., and San Francisco. Okay? And they recognize that in their market. Okay? So what does that look like? What kind of education are you looking at? What kind of income bracket are you looking at? Right? If you're going to sell a more expensive product, what kind of income does that family need to want to purchase your product over, say, the commodity product? That's the other option. Okay? And then the last one here is the psychographic, which of course being an ag economist is not my area of expertise, okay, but in any regard, are there lifestyle characteristics to this audience? Okay, are the outdoorsy people or whatever the case may be there? Are the behavior patterns, okay? In other words, do they use product a lot during the summer barbecue season or whatever case may be, or not in another time of year or whatever? Are there beliefs or values that you're trying to tap into there? Maybe no antibiotics or whatever the case may be. Just recognizing what that audience looks like that you think is going to buy your product. Okay? So that's what we call market segmentation. That's taking anything from the whole world and segmenting it down and saying, these are the people I'm going to sell to. Okay? That's not to exclude the others. It's just to be realistic, okay, in terms of where you're going to target your market. Right? Okay, so once you have an idea of what that segmentation looks like, then the next task is to make an estimate of what you think your sales volume might look like. Okay? And again, this is just being realistic. In commodity worlds, we don't even worry about this, right? We know we can always sell all of our production. It's just a matter of what price we get, right? Okay, we might get a low price, might get a high price. That's determined by what the market gives us, but we can get rid of it all in that commodity world. Okay? And to be realistic, some people in the product world actually realize that they're not going to get all of their product out in the channels they prefer, and they actually have to sell some of it in the commodity world. So it's not a bad thing that exists, right? Okay? But in the differentiated world, when you're sitting there looking at what that target market looks like, okay, what do those demographic stats look like for that geographic region, okay, that you think you're going to market into? Okay? So you might look and say, well, we're going to market in a 500-mile radius of where we're at today or something like that. Okay, and you go and you say, what's the population? 500-mile radius? I'm just guessing. Let's just say it's 10 million people or something like that. Okay, so you got 10 million people out there. Realistically, what percentage of those do you expect to sell to? Okay, and let's just say it's 5%. You say, well, that's 500,000 people, okay, that could be buying my product. Okay, and so right there you got to look at the size that you have to work with. Okay. Now, then you need to, once you see that size that you're working with, okay, that 500,000 people is your conservative estimate of how you're going to penetrate that market, right? How do you come up with that number, right? How do you come up with the fact that you think you can get 5% to buy it? And there's really two valid ways to do that. One of them is to survey that population and just see, okay? Another way is to look at somebody else who's served a similar population and see what they were able to get, okay? Now, on the surface, you say a survey is expensive and difficult to do, and maybe that's not plausible, so let's look at what somebody else did. The problem with niche marketing and product marketing is that a lot of that information is proprietary, and those people won't share that with you. Okay, so you're hoping somebody else has that information, can actually tell you that this branded beef product got, 2% of this market share in this area, or something like that. Okay? But from a survey standpoint, you go out and you say, okay, so how many of these people, you need a good random sample of them, and you say, if we put this in front of you, would you buy it, and what would you be willing to pay for it? So that's why you see that kind of stuff out there when people are doing surveys, okay? But that'll give you a handle on what that'll look like, okay? Right? So define, then step 3 is to move on and say, what is my product or service and how is it actually unique? Okay? Why are these customers going to buy this? What does it do for them and what are they willing to pay for? Okay? And hopefully at this point you've kind of thought that through a little bit. Okay? And certainly if you're trying to define that market size in terms of how many people would be willing to buy it, okay, you've given it some thought. Okay? And so you're actually, all of these steps, even though they're listed step 1 through whatever, 8 in total, even though you might go through them in process, you're constantly iterating back. Okay, so a common thing to do here would to look at this and say, I made that estimate of 5% out of 500,000 people, or out of 10 million people, gave me 500,000 people that I think I can market to. But I'm going to back off on that. I think actually 5% might buy branded beef similar to mine. And when I'm sitting here saying, what does mine do for the customer? Why is it unique? What are they willing to pay for? I realize that I actually have, other competitors in this. And maybe that 500,000 people I'm thinking of, I'm actually not going to get them all. Okay? And so you go back and you revise your actual numbers in terms of what you think you'll actually reach. Okay? All right? So that would be a part of step 4 also. Maybe it comes to light here when you look at those competitors in the marketplace. How do you position relative to them? What are your advantages? What are your disadvantages relative to what they are offering? Okay? And it could be all over the scope. It could be a quality thing. It could be an ability to supply the market at a certain point in time. Okay? Who knows what it might be, but just be realistic in terms of who else is competing with you for that target audience and what your share of it might be. Okay, so those steps really go together. When you talk about step 1, defining it and looking at your potential, and then how you're unique and who your competitors are, those are things that's a package of just looking at what it is in terms of potential that you might have, okay, for the marketplace. All right, now I've been speaking to this from a standpoint of actually packaged beef, more or less, but this also applies if you're marketing a live animal, right? Your marketplace obviously could be quite a bit different, but realistically, how far are you going to deliver that live animal? Or maybe you're not even going to deliver it. Maybe they have to come to you. What does that audience look like out there? How many of them are there that could potentially buy it? Where else could they buy a similar animal to yours? And what are they going to pay for it? And how far do they have to go to get it? Okay, so it could be applied to live animals as well as the packaged beef. Okay? Okay, so then step 5 is distribution and packaging. And this is one that's going to take a little bit more to go through, okay, in terms of the different pieces to it, because there's quite a bit more here, okay? And again, I just said that about the live animal and the packaging, even though it says packaging here, delivery of a live animal is packaging it for the customer, right? Okay, or even You know, the example I use a lot with students when I'm teaching entrepreneurship, there's a lot of on-farm tours and stuff like that, you know, the on-farm tourism experience. That's packaging. There's a way to package that experience as a service for the customer. Okay, so packaging applies across the board. It doesn't have to just be, you know, meat in the meat case, okay, or meat delivered to the door, and so on. Okay, so there's 4 things to look at. One of them is the scope. The second one is the movement, the packaging itself, and then the schedule in which you deliver it and how you handle it. Okay? All right, so let's talk about the scope first. Okay, and this goes directly back to that target market, right? Geographically, how wide are you going to distribute this? Okay, realistically, how far is this product going to reach from where you're at today, and what does that look like? Okay? Right? So there's a number of different ways you can view that, right? And that goes from essentially, you know, a widespread approach, that you might say intensive in terms of the scope itself. Okay, we're going to serve the whole U.S., for example, would be a very intensive scope. And we're going to try to get this product out everywhere we can get it within the continental U.S. To maybe something more selective, like I mentioned just a second ago, with you say I'm going to go 500 miles from where I'm located, and that's my scope. Okay, you're going to exclude based off of distance maybe, or whatever the case may be, or maybe, as I mentioned with the lamb industry, they're targeting specific metro markets, those 3 in particular, DC, New York, and San Francisco, or something like that, that narrows it down a little bit. And then you could go all the way down to a very exclusive approach, which puts a very prestigious placement on it. Okay? And the example, I hate to keep using the lamb industry, but they're so segmented and specialized with how they get their product out, it's easy to pick examples. But the Colorado lamb people in particular, with the mountain resorts there, the ski resorts, that's a very exclusive market for their lamb. They have very specific products that go in there, and they're very concentrated in their effort to market to those people. Okay? So that would be an example. And of course, the more exclusive you get, the more prestigious you get with that placement of it, the prices go up, right? So even if you're marketing live animals, if you have a very high-end quality of animal, and you're very exclusive in your marketing, you tend to get higher prices. The volume's not there, right? Okay? Because there's not that many buyers out there for it. Okay? So scope, okay, is a matter of just you know, a lot of, in terms of just the size, sheer size of that geographically, region you're trying to do. And then the second piece on the distribution of packaging is the movement of it. Okay, in these direct marketing options, where you're going direct to the consumer, I already mentioned that farmers markets is one of them that you can do there. Some people do an on-farm store. You see a lot of mail order stuff that goes directly to the consumer. On the fruit and vegetable side, you see a lot of CSAs out there. Okay, and then of course mail order, right? Go on there, Omaha Steaks, right? They're basically do mail orders. Okay. What's that? Community-supported agriculture. Community-supported agriculture. Okay, so you see a lot of people with like basically a fruit and vegetable farm, right? And people buy shares in that, and then they'll get delivery of X amount for their share.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and so they share in the risk of the actual production, and they're, you know, upfront to purchasing a share in the actual production. Okay? Lots of advantage. Big one, of course, it cuts out the middleman. And when I put all those segments up there, it gives you more of that profit margin. Okay, so more of that comes back to you as a producer of it. And you also get to know the consumer better, right? So how does your product fit in that end consumer market? You know that firsthand because you're talking to them. Right? They're telling you what they really like and don't like about your product. And they're showing you with their pocketbook what they're willing to pay and not pay. Right? So lots of advantages to this. Of course, the big disadvantage is it takes a lot of time to do all of this, and it takes, for a lot of people, a new skill set. Okay? And, you know, with ag in particular, you know, a lot of ag producers are really good producers. They're excellent producers. And they're not so good on the customer service, consumer-oriented stuff, okay? So realize whether you have that skill set or not. Do you need to hire it in? Or in a lot of cases, some of the producers I know that have been successful with this, it's the younger generation. This is their foothold into the farm or ranch, right? They take an X amount of the product and direct market it to the consumers, and they take it over. There's a family I know in Colorado. The dad basically was running a cattle feedlot. The son started a sheep feedlot. The daughter wanted to come back and be a part of it, didn't have a niche in there. So what they do, they bought themselves a processing facility, and she runs that along with 78 labels that I'll get to here in a second for specialized meat products that go out into the public. Okay, so that was her way to get back into this family, basically feedlot meat production enterprise. Okay. Now, there is potential for low volume here, especially as you're getting all of this established. And that's where I mentioned, be realistic on what you actually might be able to market through these channels. Do you have to have other avenues to market the rest of your product? Can you live off of this type of volume while you establish it, and so on and so forth? Okay? All right. So the other option on the movement side is to go through intermediaries. Okay, go through wholesalers, go through distributors, brokers, handlers. We see a lot now on the livestock side where we see cooperatives being formed, where one producer doesn't want to do it all themselves, but they join together, they form a cooperative, they hire an executive to run the cooperative, and maybe 2 or 3 staff to help them and do some of that marketing in, but they're basically joining forces in a cooperative setting to do that. There's also going straight to the retailers, right? Whether it's Whole Foods or somebody else that's direct buying from you, but they're dealing with the actual retailers on a day-to-day basis, and you're capturing all of those pieces in between. Okay? So what does this do? Well, first of all, it helps you move larger volumes because they're taking care of this, and they're reaching a market much wider than you can do on your own. Okay? There are some disadvantages, and that is that you're giving away some of that profit margin, because obviously these people are hitting the end piece of it, and they're capturing some of the more lucrative side of the profit margins equation when we look at that marketing channel. And the other piece is you get a little disconnected from the consumer, right? Because they're the ones dealing directly with the consumer, and largely you're getting that feedback through them. Okay? So 2 different approaches. Just realize where you're at in that, whether you want to directly market to the consumers, or whether you want to work through an intermediary, and then how you're going to make that work. Okay? All right, so we had scope, movement, packaging is the third piece of that puzzle, right? So it needs to be functional, obviously. However you package your product needs to work, but it also can be very promotional, right? It can also really, that branded beef logo is very promotional when you see it on a package and people recognize it, right? If the delivery is at the retail level, you need to be conscious that there's packaging standards that exist that you have to meet. I mentioned the processing facility out in Colorado that I'm familiar with. They had, at the time, last time I visited them, they had 78 labels that they had to maintain for basically customers that were slaughtering beef and bison in particular in their facility, that they had to interact with USDA and the FDA and make sure everything was in place and that it all worked, right? Because there's things that you have to put on your packaging by law, including the weight, common name for it, nutrition facts, your business address, all of those things need to be approved and a part of it, okay? Services also need packaging, right? I mentioned that in terms of if you're delivering live animals, that's part of the service. If you're delivering meat through the mail, that's part of the service. Okay, what does that look like for the customer, right? Is somebody from your company wearing your shirt showing up on the doorstep and handing it to them? Is it showing up by UPS? Okay, is it showing up in the middle of the day? Is it showing up at 7 a.m. before they go to work? All of those are part of the packaging piece, okay, packaging and delivery, right? Okay, and then the schedule piece. How often is a big one, right? Especially with perishable products and services. Certainly food is somewhat perishable, right? Okay? And if you're delivering fresh meat versus frozen meat, that makes a difference in how you're going to actually deliver it. But it's also the case in services, right? Of course, the airline industry and the motel industry has recognized this for years. That's why you see all these different prices, depending on when the plane's about to take off, right? Where you're at in the evening at the motel, right? And whether they have rooms available that are going to go sit empty overnight, you can get a deal there, right? Okay? So anyway, you can have perishable products and services. So if you're somebody that's into agritourism and you give farm tours, that's a perishable service. You got a fixed cost on somebody giving that tour, and maybe a tractor and a trailer or something involved with it, whatever the case may be. That's a fixed cost. If there's 5 people on it or the capacity is 30, you pretty much have the same cost there. It's a perishable service. How often are you going to give tours? It's a big decision for somebody in that situation. Okay? The thing about if you're working directly with consumers, right, you can work with that. You can figure that out. You can optimize that for your situation. If you're working through intermediaries, you're largely dealing with people that expect a steady flow of product. So that's another disadvantage that might be there for them. Okay? If you're going to work with an intermediary, they want reliable supply. Okay? It doesn't mean it has to be the same all year long. You just need to come to an agreement of when you're delivering throughout the year, and you need to be able to supply them. Okay? All right, so step 6 is the pricing. This is the other one with several pieces to it to consider. There's 2 main things, of course. What does it cost you to actually produce the product? Okay? And then what are the prevailing market prices that you're going to be dealing with? What are your competitors getting in that marketplace? Right? This is true for commodities as well as differentiated products and services. In the commodity world, of course, it's a little different in terms of the tools that you have to work with there. Because if you're in a commodity pricing thing and you have basically a product that's traded on the Board of Trade, you got marketing tools there to work with. Totally different world, right? Than if you're dealing with an actual product or differentiated product or service. Okay? But you do care about, of course, what it costs you to produce, and you care about what it is in the marketplace in terms of how you use those tools. Okay? So the basic structure doesn't change, it's just that the tools are quite a bit different. Okay? Now when you move to the differentiated pricing situation, right, where you're not dealing with commodities, there's these 6 things to look at in terms of strategies for pricing your product. And we'll go through all 6, okay? Just reading them through now. There's the penetration strategy or promotional pricing strategy. There's a skim pricing strategy. There's a cost-oriented pricing. There's relative pricing. There's flexible or variable pricing. And then there's the competitive pricing, which is also called predatory pricing. Okay, this sounds really bad, right? So recognize where you fit on this and what you want to actually do can let you know what type of information you need to make it work. Okay? Penetration. Yep. Are there any questions? Well, pause for a second.
Is your presentation slides available on the web?
I can't. They aren't up there now, but I can. You good? Okay. All right, so penetration or promotional pricing, right? This involves starting off by setting your initial price below what you expect it to be for the long run. Okay, so you got a new product, you put it out there at a fairly discounted price relative to what you would like to get for it long run. Okay, and the whole idea is you're trying to penetrate the market. All right? Lots of advantages to this. You hope you build up the volume. But the other advantage that people don't really think about is it doesn't attract competitors. Okay? It might piss them off, but it won't attract them. Yes. Okay? They might be upset that you're coming into this marketplace and pricing your meat well below theirs or pricing your animals well below theirs to get away their... But they aren't going to naturally want to compete with you because they prefer a higher price. Okay? The disadvantage, of course, is that you need to realize how long you can actually sustain this low price and stay in business. A lot of people underestimate how long it will take you to penetrate the marketplace, especially when you're trying to build brand loyalty. If you're trying to steal customers from somebody else's brand, that can take a long time. Okay? So you need to have a good handle on that. You need to do good research on how long that's going to take. And you also need to do good research on what that prevailing market price will be after you reach that volume of sales that you want to reach, right? Because that's when you hope to be making a profit. If that profit margin is fairly slim, it can take you a long time to recover those losses you had getting the market. Okay, so you need to do your math on that, do some research, and make sure that will work.
And the price become the norm and the whole price is going back?
It could, yeah, it could. All right, so that's penetration getting into the marketplace. The opposite of that is what we call skim pricing. Okay, the opposite of that is if you have a new product that's very unique, okay, and you think can command some sort of premium and nobody else can copy it for a little while, you can demand a high price, right? So when a new phone, new technology is a big example, right? So a new phone comes out, when these first came out, right, people were asking big prices, and now when we get a new model that has a bunch of things, people ask a big price, but eventually it comes down. Okay, that's called skim pricing, and that's where you're skimming the cream off the top, is where that name comes from. Okay, and you're trying to capture as many profits as you can initially before your competitors show up, because this will attract competitors, right? So if you come up with some new product, I don't know what it might be, whether it's a live animal, meat product, whatever it may be, nobody else has gotten it, and you realize that, you might have a year or 4 years or whatever the case may be to do some skim pricing, right? And capture some of those profits. But eventually that market's going to come down because you're going to attract competitors, right? Of course, this will work best when you have a brand new, unique product. And this is actually the whole premise behind our patent protection laws, right? The idea behind a patent protection is that we want to stimulate innovation. And the way to stimulate innovation is to allow people to capture some skim pricing profits for a while before other people can copy them. Okay? So that's the whole idea behind it. Not very common in agriculture, obviously, but that might apply someplace. Okay? So that's skim pricing. Cost-oriented pricing is where you basically look at what it costs you to produce, and you're using that as a basis then in terms of defining that profit margin that you're trying to get to, and you set your price based off of that. Okay? So you need to make sure you understand your cost, what it actually costs you to produce and deliver the product, especially if the delivery is an important, that delivery service is an important part of what you're selling. Okay? And you need to also understand what customers are willing to pay, if they're willing to pay them for it. Okay? And then I do a lot of stuff on risk management education, so I throw in this all the time on these things, explore uncertainty. It's okay to put numbers down as your best guess, but at the same time, think about the possible distributions around those numbers, right? So if your customer is willing to pay $8 a pound, and you think that's a pretty good estimate, what's the range around that as far as where they might fall depending on what else is happening in the marketplace, right? Now you're going to drop to $7, might go up to $9, whatever the case may be. But what is the range around that? And also on your costs, right? You might have a pretty good example of where your costs are today, but they might be a lot of risk there because you're buying grain from somebody down the road or whatever the case, buying hay from this one supplier. And if something happens there, you're going to end up having to pay a lot more for hay. Okay? So understand the uncertainties around that and where that fits. But you pretty much doing the math and seeing what it costs you and building in some sort of profit margin in your pricing. Okay? Relative pricing is looking at the marketplace, okay, and seeing what the market is giving, and then pricing yours relative to that, and you know, and your level of uniqueness or the service you provide would maybe adjust from that. But again, you still got to know what your costs are to make sure that you can actually make money there. The other piece on this in the marketplace itself is you need to understand the seasonality and trends that are involved in it, right? So you might have a market price that you see out there, but maybe it varies a lot during the year, okay? And understand where that fits and how that might affect you, okay? And then flexible or variable pricing is something that's used a lot when you have a perishable product, right? So in a perishable product, right, there's that first on the market, right, when it first becomes available, and you might be able to get a pretty high price for it because not a lot is hit. Okay? And then you get the volume and the price comes down, and then you again, because it's a lot more perishable and you're worried about it actually being worth nothing, the price goes down further as you get later in the season. Okay? That's what we call flexible or variable pricing. So thinking that through in terms of the supply and demand effects and the timing in the marketplace can help you use that strategy. Okay? But we see that a lot, certainly in fruits and vegetables in particular, right? Okay, and then the last one is the competitive pricing. This is what I said some people call predatory pricing. Pointer's not working anymore. But predatory pricing this is a little different than basically coming out in the penetration mode, right? Penetration, you're looking at being a new product, new kid on the block. Predatory pricing is used by the more established companies to get rid of competitors. I wasn't going to mention names, but we've all seen this, right? Okay. So they're looking around and they're saying, okay, and of course it's like, kind of like sharks in the water, right? They see some 3 or 4 not making it very well, and they say, look, if we lower our prices, these guys can't hold out for more than a year, and we'll get rid of them from the marketplace. Okay, that's what we call competitive pricing. Okay, generally not looked at very positively. Okay, and I'm not necessarily recommending it to you. I'm just putting it out there as a pricing strategy to be recognized, because somebody might do it to you. Okay. And of course, this is part of actually having alliances and good relationships with your competitors, in some cases, to make sure they don't do it to you. Okay? If you realize that they have a lot more resources, they're well capitalized, they're a larger company, they can withstand low prices a lot longer than you can, that could be a risk or a danger to your business. Okay? And it's worth recognizing it and what you might want to do about it. Okay? And of course, you need to, because this idea of actually maintaining or withstanding that for a long period of time is pretty tough. Okay, so those are those 6 pricing mechanisms. Okay, different strategies that we have there: penetration, skim, cost-oriented, relative, and the flexible or variable pricing, and then of course that predatory pricing to get rid of your competitors. Okay, questions on those at all? All right, I said there's only 8 steps, and we only got 2 left, right? And obviously, there's a lot that goes into a marketing plan, which is why a lot of people don't have a good one, because it takes a lot of time to put it together, right? And I do educational marketing plans, business plans, all these different things. Planning is hard work. No bones about it. No plan has to be perfect on the first draft. Matter of fact, it should be a living document. So it's better to sketch out the basics to begin with and just keep revisiting and refining it as time goes on than it is to think of it as a big term project at the end of the semester. Okay, term paper thing. That's not what it's meant to be. Just sketch it out. This comes to mind. I think I have this type of product. I'm going to write it down and remind myself. Maybe later on I figure out that service is a bigger deal than the product side and I need to focus on that or whatever the case may be. Okay? So we're getting down to the bare bones here in terms of how we're going to actually promote this product. Okay? So these, when we say promotion, it needs to be built around a message. So what is the message? You got your target audience defined. What is the message you want them to hear? Okay? Right? You can look in the big business world at messages that you hear from companies every day and see that in action. Right? See that in action. Walmart, what's their message?
Low price.
Low price, right? Low prices. That's their message. Continuously. Low prices. Okay? And you look at some of the other food chains out there where it might be. Some of them might be the quality, fresh food, right? You see these by different people. You see people talking about the experience, right? They're showing customers with smiles on their faces and happy at the at the cash register because something costs less or they got something with the smile or whatever the case may be. They're all delivering a message to that target audience. Okay? So that's what we mean here. When you actually go to get that message out to them, what does it look like? Okay? And then you need to talk about how am I going to actually deliver it? What's the timing of it? And what's the frequency? So what's the mode I'm going to get it out to them? How often am I going to give it out to them? And when am I going to get it out to them? Okay? Especially if you're on a tight budget, those are critical. You don't want to waste your money doing blanket advertising to a whole bunch of people that might not buy your product. Okay? You want to decide who they are, when they're going to be buying it, and make sure you hit them at the right time, especially if you're on a tight budget. Okay? While you're doing that and deciding that message, understand that your message could be all about the product or service you're delivering to them. It could also be about the image of your business, right? Okay, so if you're most focused on people trusting you to provide a safe food, source, an enjoyable eating thing, and you want them to trust you, you probably want to focus more on the image side of it, okay? If it's because you got a bang-up product that's way better than everybody else's, you focus more on the product itself, okay, or the service. That's the case, right? So if it's a focus on the product or the service, you're looking more at immediate sales. Understand that. So if I show you I have this fantastic product, you're taking out your checkbook or your credit card and you're buying it because you agree it's a fantastic product. I want to try that at least. And if it is fantastic, I'll keep buying it. Yeah, they recognize it and they're going to keep buying it, right? If you're focused on image, that's more of a long-term thing, right? Because it takes a while to build that brand loyalty, okay? All right, so that's the promotion side of it. Image, create a clear picture, okay? Make sure they understand what it is you see that you are standing up for. Logo certainly is a part of that, but you want to pair it with your mission statement, whether the values, okay, that you have as a business, because ultimately on the image side, you're connecting with them on their values, because they have similar values as you do. They like to see the product produced and delivered the way you are doing it. So you want to make sure that's a part of what you actually promote to them, okay? And it's really kind of an empathy thing, saying, here, I'm one of you. This is the, if it's food, this is the food I want to produce for my family, and I'm just assuming you would want it for your family, kind of thing too. Okay? And even on live animals, right? A lot of times when you're selling a live animal to somebody, that connection is that they look at you as somebody that produced it the way you would like to have it produced. Okay? So it's that connection in terms of that image. Right? Okay, and then the last step is assessing the inventory and storage management needs. Right, so how are you going to store and deliver your product when it's needed and still maintain the quality? Right, especially as a perishable product. You know, realistically, you might be able to, you know, in the meat sector, you might be able to deliver some fresh meat, different segments of the market. You might have frozen meat that you stretch out that inventory for longer periods of time. Okay? So then you also, when you're actually doing that storage and stuff, you're worried about the regulatory stuff in terms of what you have to do to store it correctly and so on and so forth. Okay? And how those will work into those strategies. Okay? All right. So again, the motivation behind this is looking at these emerging marketing channels where these differences between them are becoming a little grayer, right? So we're looking at it as a producer, perhaps, down here, capturing more of this channel in different ways. How do we fit into that? How does that change the product that we're actually marketing or the service that we're actually marketing? And what does that plan look like? Okay, so that's the motivation. So I just want to, as I come to the end here, I want to talk a little bit about integration. Okay, I alluded to it a little bit earlier in terms of people capturing different pieces of that. But understand that by definition, when people talk about integration, they're talking about full ownership. Okay, so full ownership of the various stages is when we use the term integration. Okay, now that doesn't necessarily mean that they're capturing a bigger piece of the marketplace. They're just controlling their piece further through the channel. Does that make sense? And they're doing it through full ownership. Okay? So that's what people mean when they say that they're vertically integrated. Okay? The term integrated means that they're buying up other pieces of that channel. The thing that this does is it removes price signals. And if a lot of people do that, then a lot of price signals go away and people don't know what the going market price is between these two segments of the channel. Okay? What's that? Somewhat, but that really, a lot of the stuff in the beef industry right now is because we only have a handful of processors and there's a lot of vertical integration. That's the big complaint in terms of actual processors owning the animals in the feedlot. Okay? We have what we call a really thin cash market, right? Because a lot of those transactions are quote unquote hidden from the public. Okay? Yes?
What do you mean by price signaling?
Price signaling, like in an auction barn or whatever, you see these prices being exchanged publicly, right? And so then that creates a price signal to everybody that they say, hey, cattle are trading at this price. Meat is trading at this price. You see those signals out in the marketplace. On the other hand, if we buy up the next step in the chain, we basically just transfer it from company A to company B, and we own both of those. We don't have to tell anybody about it, right? Which is where this mandatory pricing thing gets really tricky in the public place, because people are worried about that. They're saying, hey, we don't have any price signals going on here, and people don't know what the going price is. Okay? That make sense? All right. Now, vertical coordination is a more comprehensive term. Okay? So vertical coordination is basically when you get agreements between those levels, but not necessarily full ownership. Okay? Now, these can also create situations where price discovery and price signals, right, are hidden by agreement. Okay, so in terms of what happens in the marketplace, each of these is equally a big deal if you're just out there wanting to know what the cash price is for a product. Okay, it can be hidden by, two entities owned by the same, essentially underneath the same roof. It can also be hidden by a contracting agreement, private contracting agreement between them. What's that?
Health insurance.
I can't.
Health insurance.
Yes. Health insurance. Yep. Okay, so in the picture, vertical coordination is the big term. Vertical integration is one of the ways to do that. Okay? And I put it down there on the bottom because here's some other ways it happens. Strategic alliance. Right? So you maintain your independence as firms, but you agree to do business with one another. Right? And I put Nyman Ranch up here as an example. Whole Foods is an example. Where producers agree to raise the product, the animal a certain way, deliver it to them, and then they'll slaughter it and market it. Two separate entities, it's a contract agreement, it's a strategic alliance between the two. Okay? Formal written contracts obviously are usually a part of that. They can be a part of anything. Okay, private contracts. And in livestock and another, livestock in particular, we're seeing a lot of livestock marketing cooperatives form for this reason. Okay, so livestock cooperative, as I mentioned, producers join forces. Okay, they join forces in a cooperative entity. They agree to deliver their live animals to that entity, and then that entity is going to take it on from there in terms of capturing different parts in the marketing channel. Okay, a colleague of mine, Greg McKee at UNL, he's our cooperatives person. He and I just finished an article where we looked at one for swine, one for beef, and one for lamb. Okay, and we looked through how they were structured. These were ones that have lasted 10, 15, well, in case of one, or 30 plus years, but at least 10 or 15 years, so we qualify them as successes because they're still around. And how were they structured? What made producers get in them? Why are they able to continue going, and so on and so forth? Okay. One of the things to understand is people think of it as capturing those prices or capturing the profit in those other pieces of the channel. The reality is, in most livestock cooperatives, don't pay a dividend. Okay? For the most part, what they're doing is providing a more risk-less price, not necessarily a higher price, but a more stable price to those producers, and they're providing a reliable place for them to deliver at that price. Okay? So it's more of a risk management tool than one might think in terms of what the purpose of the cooperative is. Okay? But that would fall under vertical coordination also, okay? But it's not full ownership. You, the producer, don't own the cooperative. You just own shares in it like a bunch of other people own shares in it, okay? All right, so just to close out here, this is the 8 steps I went through, okay? And some of you may be disappointed because I haven't given you the 5 Ps of a marketing plan, okay? Which everybody gets when they do Marketing 101, right? Remember what they are? They are actually up there, right? People is the first one. That's your target market, your product, okay? Your place, which would be your distribution in that, pricing and promotion. Those are what we commonly call the 5 Ps. I usually don't make that a focus of what I present because I think there are a lot that's underneath there, and this is a little more comprehensive, okay? But they're all there. All right, so take-home points. If I had to send you home with 2 important points, these would be it. Okay? First one, as I mentioned, that target market is key. know what it is. Okay? Most marketing experts contend that the greatest mistake made by businesses is failing to clearly define their target market. Okay? They're so focused on their product, they think they'll get the word out and people will buy it. But they don't really know who those people are yet. And they don't make an effort to define them. Okay? As I said, this is a living document. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but at least make the effort to see what they're like and understand how important it is so you can refine that definition as you go along. Okay? So they end up with products that don't necessarily meet the customer needs is one thing that can happen. Okay, I mentioned Offer Brand as an example of that. They also spend a whole bunch of money on ads that don't reach, they try to reach everyone with them and they really miss the people that would buy their product because they don't understand who they are yet. Okay, and almost everybody has somewhat of a limited budget, so you want to be very strategic with those ads. Okay, and the other thing that tends to happen if you don't understand your target market is that you end up with the unprofitable customers being your most common customers. They're there to get the discounts because they know that they will show up eventually. They're not there to pay the premium because the people that would pay the premium don't even know you exist. Okay, because you haven't hit them with the advertisement. Okay, so know who that target market is and get that advertisement, that promotion and stuff fit there. The other thing, and I haven't focused on this too much here, but after you get the customer, that's not where your focus on who they are ends. The most important, the second big take-home point is you need to not just be customer focused in terms of your target market, but also as far as how you run your business long term. Keep that focus on the customer. Okay? There's a survey done in the business world. This is in retail. And they came back with 6% of unsatisfied customers actually complain. That means 94% walk away. And the main point is those 94% usually don't walk back in and buy. So you don't even hear 94% of the complaints. Okay? The other thing they found in that same survey was that of those that walk away, about a third of them tell somebody about that experience. Okay? So they're talking to their friends, they're talking to their relatives, they're talking to their colleagues, and they're telling them, I had a bad experience with this teller at this cash register, and they were rude and didn't even act like I was there. Okay? They don't complain to the owner never knows about it, but a third of their friends know about it. Okay? If you want to put a number on that, the average is about 6 friends know about it. Okay? Or 6 other people know about that experience. Okay? So they put all this together and they did an estimate and they said that for every 100 customers that are dissatisfied for whatever reason with your product or your service, you lose about 32 to 36 customers, either current customers that decide they don't want to do business with you anymore, or potential customers who decide they won't do business with you. Okay, and so those are big numbers, right? You need to focus on that customer when you target them, when you figure out what you can do with it, but you don't lose focus on them once you're there, because you want to make sure you keep them. Okay? Right? Okay. All right. Wow, that was pretty close to my time. Questions? Surely, yeah. No?
Yeah, they haven't formulated those. The 5 P's were people, product, something, pricing, and promotion.
Place was the third. And place deals with the distribution and where you're going to put it.
I got one.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any particular experience with people who market, live animals for custom slaughter, and how to do that successfully? I mean, I've seen web pages and stuff, but that's what we're doing.
Right, and a lot of the key part of that, of course, is the target market. Most of my experience, and she asked if I had any experience with people marketing live animals for slaughter to other folks.
Right, like a side of beef.
Side of beef and so on. Most of my experience, I was in Colorado for 20 plus years before I came here. I'm actually from western Nebraska originally. Sorry, I didn't give you my life's history. Assumed you didn't care. But anyway, we see a lot of that on the Front Range of Colorado. And a lot of it is basically you have an intermediary there, I would say. They've got people feet on the ground along the Front Range finding the customers. There's a lot of local processing facilities there that they work through. And the ones that have that kind of infrastructure in place make a good profit off of it. Okay? But it takes a lot of work, which means that somebody's got to go develop that market,
Right,
which is usually in a metro area.
exactly.
And-
Because everybody around you already has cows.
Right. Yeah. So it's, do you have somebody to do that? So in this case, along the Front Range, what I've seen is people that have taken on that role, okay, to basically play that middle person and get the meat out to the customer. Okay? But it takes a long time to get that set up.
So when you've got a new product, and you've got it halfway ready to put out there, and you want to develop your marketing strategy, you sit down and you look at what you think you have, what it's going to be, what it's going to cost to produce it, what it's going to cost, what I think I can make off of it, who I'm going to sell it to. But then I want to make sure that the customer can get back to me. So I need them to know who I am.
Yeah, she asked if you have a new product, she was kind of going through the steps. And you spoke about what it is that I have, can I produce it for a decent cost, I guess, and then price it into the marketplace, and who's going to buy it, and creating channels for them to get back to me once they buy it, okay? The only thing I would say about that is reverse that a little bit, okay? A lot of this, you guys don't buy a car usually. Well, can't say that. Used to say this reliably. You don't buy a car without driving it, but now with the internet, sometimes people do. Okay, but in general, you test drive a car, right? That's the try before you buy. That's a risk management strategy. Okay. If you think you got a great product and you want to do some direct marketing, one of the things that you can do is get some people to test it for you. Okay. And this is actually a number of different ways you can do that. Invite people over and have a barbecue and see what they say when they're eating the steak. That's an example. Whatever the case may be. Maybe you got some unique burger product that's got some seasoning in it that's going to make great hamburgers or something like that. Have people try that. Whatever the case may be, get that feedback from them that says, hey, there's people that really like this and they value it and I think I got a market for it. Then you work from there to say, what size of market is this? What is that? And you build from there. Okay? But if you just think you have the product and you haven't tested it yet, sometimes you can be deeply disappointed with the fact that there's not a premium there to capture and cover your costs. That make sense?
You said you were from western Nebraska?
Yes. I'm from the far southwest corner. The closest town to our farm was Bushnell, which is in Kimball County. So we didn't have all this rain there. The sun came up at 5 o'clock in the summer, which I've missed, by the way. Other question? Kim, I think they have lunch next, is that right? Okay, I'll stick around. If you have questions, want to come up and ask me, I'll be glad to answer them for you.